You smile today, or your father's company is gone by morning. Emily Carter read the text one more time, her wedding dress still perfect, her hands shaking. 2 hours before she was supposed to become Mrs. Nathan Holloway. She opened a contact she had never deleted in 7 years. Her fingers typed 3 words she had rehearsed 1,000 times in dreams and never planned to send. If you still want me, come. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this, and drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The dress weighed 11 pounds. Emily knew because she had asked the seamstress twice both times, laughing it off like it was a casual curiosity. But standing alone inside the bridal suite of the Holloway estate, she could feel every single ounce of it pressing down against her ribs, against her lungs, against the part of her chest where her real breath used to live before Nathan Holloway entered her life and quietly took it from her. She had not eaten since Thursday. Not because of nerves. Not because the dress required it. Because every time she sat at the table inside this house, she felt Nathan watching her, the way a man watches something he has already purchased. Patient. Certain. Uninterested in whether the thing itself was happy. Outside the suite window, she could hear the catering staff moving across the lawn. She could hear a string quartet running through the processional for the 4th time. She could hear her mother's voice somewhere 2 floors below, organizing bridesmaids with the cheerful, desperate energy of a woman trying to outrun her own awareness that something was wrong. Her mother had asked her last night very quietly, standing in the kitchen doorway, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Emily had smiled and said, "Of course." Her mother had nodded and walked away, and neither of them mentioned it again, because they both understood that happiness was not really what was being discussed. What was being discussed was survival. Her father's company, the construction contracts Nathan had arranged, the bank loans Nathan had quietly guaranteed, the entire structural weight of her family's life resting on the foundation of this marriage, like a building balanced on a single beam. Emily set her phone face down on the vanity. She picked up her lipstick. She put it down without opening it. She turned and looked at herself in the full-length mirror, really looked the way she almost never allowed herself to do anymore. And she tried to remember the last time the woman in the mirror had made a decision that belonged entirely to herself. She could not remember. She was 29 years old. She had a graduate degree in art history from Tulane. She had once spent an entire summer in Florence, studying Baroque portraiture and crying every Thursday night because she missed New Orleans so badly she could taste the beignets in her sleep. She had laughed loudly her entire life, the kind of laugh her father called a public disturbance, and her mother called contagious. And Nathan, 3 weeks into their relationship, had called a little much for certain settings. She had laughed less since then. She was reaching for the lipstick again when her phone lit up on the vanity. She did not have to look at the name to know who it was. She looked anyway. Nathan. She turned it face down again. Then she picked it up because refusing to read it would not make it go away, and nothing about Nathan Holloway went away simply because you turned your back. Smile today. Whatever you're feeling in that room right now, leave it there. You walk down that aisle looking like the woman I chose, or your father's company doesn't open its doors on Monday. I'm not threatening you, Emily. I'm telling you how things work. She read it twice. She set the phone down. She breathed. In the mirror, she watched herself breathe, watched her shoulders rise and fall inside 11 pounds of white silk. And she thought with a clarity that frightened her that this was the most honest moment she had experienced in 2 years. Not the engagement party. Not the anniversary dinner where Nathan had given her a diamond bracelet in front of 40 people, and she had kissed his cheek and said, "I love it," and meant absolutely nothing. Not at any of those mornings she had woken up beside him, feeling like a photograph of herself instead of a person. This moment. Alone. Reading a threat disguised as a wedding day text. This was honest. She did not cry. She had expected to cry if it ever came to this. She had imagined in the abstract way she had begun imagining her own life, as if it were happening to someone else, that the breaking point would involve tears. A collapse of some kind. A moment of dramatic dissolution. Instead, she felt very still. She opened her contacts. She did not search for the name. She knew exactly where it was because she had looked at it before many times over 7 years. Never pressing call, never deleting it, either. Keeping it the way people keep certain photographs, not because they intend to go back, but because some things you cannot make yourself erase. Vincent Moretti. Below the name, a New Orleans area code. A number she had memorized without trying. She typed, "If you still want me, come." She stared at the words for 11 seconds. She pressed send before she could think about what she was doing, and then she set the phone face down again, and stood up and walked to the window and looked out at 200 guests arranging themselves on white chairs across her future. Judges, city council members, 3 state senators, business partners, Nathan's law partners, Nathan's college friends, Nathan's contacts in banking and real estate in the political infrastructure of Louisiana that Nathan had been quietly building for 15 years. Her mother was down there somewhere. Her father was down there. James Carter, 62 years old. The man who had built Carter Construction from a 2-man operation into a mid-sized firm with 40 employees who had shaken Nathan Holloway's hand at a charity gala 3 years ago and said, "My daughter talks about you," and had no idea in that moment that he was handing a lever to a man who would spend the next 3 years using it. Emily watched a catering server adjust a centerpiece on table 14. Her phone buzzed. She turned it over. One line. "Lock the door. Don't trust anyone. I'm already here." She stared at those 12 words. She looked up at the sky through the window. She walked to the suite door and turned the lock. Her maid of honor, Claire Thibodeau, knocked 7 minutes later. "M, they need you for the pre-ceremony photos in 20. I need a few more minutes." A pause. "You okay in there?" "I'm fine. Just give me a little more time." Another pause longer. "Nathan sent Marcus up to check on you." Marcus Reyes. Nathan's head of personal security. The man who had appeared in Emily's life 18 months ago as a standard precaution for someone in Nathan's position, and who had been a constant quiet presence ever since in the lobby of her office building outside the restaurant when she had lunch with Claire at the gym where she went 3 mornings a week. Not her security. Nathan's. "Tell Marcus I'm fine," Emily said, keeping her voice light. "I'm touching up my makeup. He's going to want to hear it from you directly." Emily walked to the door without unlocking it. "Marcus." She spoke through the wood. "I'm touching up my makeup. I'll be out in 15 minutes. Silence on the other side. Then, "Yes, ma'am." She heard his footsteps move away down the hall. She returned to the window. She was looking for something without knowing exactly what she was looking for. A car, a face, a signal of some kind when her phone buzzed again. Side entrance. East wall. Ivy-covered gate. "Do not go through the front." She wrote back, "They'll see me leave." The response came in under 10 seconds. "They're watching the front. The east side has a 2-minute window. You have 8 minutes." She looked at the dress. 11 pounds of white silk. A cathedral train. Pearl buttons up the back that had taken her mother 45 minutes to fasten this morning. Each one placed with a care that had made Emily's throat tight. She thought about her mother's face this morning. The way her hands had trembled slightly not from age, but from the specific trembling of someone who loves a person they are afraid to protect. She typed, "I can't run in this dress." "You don't have to run." She pressed her fingers against her mouth. She thought about her father, about 40 employees and their families, about the bank loan that Nathan had guaranteed, about the contract for the Riverside development that Nathan had quietly arranged after 2 years of Carter Construction, struggling to land bids large enough to keep the company afloat. She thought about Nathan's face at dinner 2 weeks ago when she had asked casually who else had bid on the Riverside project. The way he had smiled. The way he had set down his fork with the deliberateness of a man who enjoys being the only person in the room who knows how a story ends. "Eat your fish, Emily," he had said. "It's getting cold." She opened the closet. The emergency exit from the Holloway Estate's East Wing had been installed during a 1987 renovation and had not, as far as Emily could determine, been used since. The door opened onto a service corridor behind the main house, and the service corridor opened onto a narrow pathway that ran along the estate's interior east wall, landscaped on both sides, gravel underfoot, invisible from the main lawn. She moved fast, holding the train of her dress in both hands, her heels crunching softly on the gravel. The ivy gate was exactly where the text said it would be. A man was standing on the other side of it. She recognized him before she could see him. Clearly, recognized the shape of him, the width of his shoulders, the particular stillness he had always carried with him like a second language. Some people moved through spaces and filled them. Vincent Moretti moved through spaces and made them quiet. He looked at her through the bars of the gate. She looked at him. 7 years. And she had imagined this moment not often, not deliberately, but in the involuntary way the mind returns to an unfinished sentence. She had imagined what she would say. She had not imagined saying nothing. But she said nothing, and neither did he. He opened the gate. The car waiting beyond the gate was black, unmarked, driven by a man who introduced himself as Dom and who did not speak again for the duration of the ride. Emily sat in the back with Vincent and was aware of every inch of space between them. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No." "Did he hurt you?" "Not the way you mean." Vincent looked at her. In the low light of the car's interior, he looked older than she had expected. Not old, but marked. The kind of face that had carried weight. His jaw was the same. His eyes were the same. That quiet, direct attention that had always made her feel when she was 22, like the most real person in any room. "I need you to understand something," he said, "about what I can and can't do." "What can't you do?" "I can't undo the last 7 years. I can't explain them the way you deserve them explained right now." He looked out the window. "And I can't make choices for you. I want to be clear about that. What you do next is yours." She stared at him. "I text you for the first time in 7 years, she said slowly. "From inside my own wedding, and the first thing you tell me is that you can't make choices for me." "Yes. That's a strange opening." "I know. Nathan is probably having the estate searched right now." "He is. And you're not worried?" "No." She looked out the other window. The city was moving past the city she had grown up in, the city she had chosen to stay in, the city Nathan had spent 2 years using as a demonstration of his reach, his relationships, his architectural understanding of how power flowed. "You knew about Nathan," she said. It was not a question. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Yes." "For how long?" "Long enough." Her chest did something complicated. "Then why?" "Because it wasn't my choice to make." He turned back to her, and his voice carried something that she could not immediately name, something that sounded like old pain, worn smooth by years of carrying it. "I was waiting for you to make it yourself." She did not respond to that. She was thinking about her father. "His company," she said. "Nathan controls the loan guarantee. If this falls apart, your father's company is not in danger." She turned sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means the Riverside contract guarantee has already been transferred to a private investor outside of Nathan's reach. It happened this morning. Your father doesn't know yet. He will by Monday, and there will be a paper trail clean enough to hold up in any court." Emily stared at him. "You had this planned," she said. "I had options prepared." "That's the same thing." "Emily, when—" The word came out harder than she intended. "When did you start planning this? A week ago? A month? How long have you had your finger in my life, Vincent?" He did not look away. "A long time. The headquarters." She could not think of another word for. It was a converted warehouse in the warehouse district. The exterior was unremarkable. The interior had been transformed into something that was half office building, half residential space, with enough security infrastructure that Emily noticed it even without knowing what she was looking at. Cameras. Keypads. A man at the desk who stood when Vincent entered and said nothing. Dom pulled the car around to an underground entrance. Inside, Vincent showed her to a room on the second floor. Clean. Simply furnished. A window overlooking an interior courtyard. "You're safe here," he said. "Safe is an interesting word. What would you prefer? Honest." She set down the small bag she had grabbed from the sweet closet passport phone charger, a few cash bills she had been quietly accumulating for the past 3 months. In the specific way a woman accumulates a private reserve when some part of her brain knows she may need to move fast. I want honest. He nodded. I know. Not tonight, she said. Tonight I need to think. But tomorrow. Tomorrow. He said, I'll answer everything. She looked at him standing in the doorway. The same face. The same stillness. 22-year-old Emily had loved this man with the specific, incautious totality that belongs to a person who has not yet learned how much loving someone can cost. 29-year-old Emily was more careful now. One thing, she said. Right now, tonight. Yes, my mother. She doesn't know where I am. She's going to be standing in that garden in 40 minutes watching a wedding that isn't going to happen, and she is going to be terrified. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and set a phone on the small table beside her. Untraceable. Call her from that. She picked it up. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. He nodded once and pulled the door closed behind him. She sat down on the edge of the bed and breathed for a long time, feeling the weight of the dress against her legs, thinking about her mother's voice and what to say, and how much of the truth a person could receive in a single phone call. Then she dialed. Her mother answered on the first ring. Emily. One word. Her mother's voice was pulled so tight it was nearly soundless. Emily, where are you? I'm safe, Mom. I'm safe, I promise. They said you were gone. They said the suite was empty. Nathan is... I know. Emily closed her eyes. I need you to listen to me. Can you listen? A sharp, controlled inhale. Then, yes. I couldn't do it. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know the timing is... Emily. Her mother's voice broke and rebuilt itself in the same breath. Emily, stop. I know. She opened her eyes. What? I know. A pause. I have known for months. I have been watching my daughter disappear for 2 years, and I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to give you permission to... Her voice fractured again. Your father and I, we would rather lose the company. Do you hear me? We would rather lose everything. Emily sat very still inside 11 pounds of silk. She had not expected that. She had been so certain, so absolutely architecturally certain, that her parents' stability depended on this marriage that she had not once stopped to ask whether her parents had agreed to that price. Where are you? Her mother asked. Are you truly safe? Yes. I can't tell you where right now, but yes. Is it someone you trust? A complicated word, trust. She thought about Vincent standing in the doorway. She thought about 7 years. She thought about 12 words on a screen. Lock the door. Don't trust anyone. I'm already here. I think so, she said. Good. Her mother's voice steadied into something that sounded absurdly almost like relief. Then stay there. Don't come back tonight. And Emily. Yes. Call your father. He needs to hear your voice. She called her father next. James Carter. 62. The man who had built a company with his hands, who had shaken the wrong man's hand at a charity gala and spent 3 years watching that handshake become a chain, who answered the phone in a voice that told her he had been pacing. Dad. My God. A long silence on his end. My God, Emily, are you all right? I'm all right. They're saying Nathan is there. Are people everywhere here? The police are. Dad, stop. Breathe. She used the same voice he had used for her every time she was 8 years old and falling apart over something enormous. I need you to hear me. I'm hearing. I am not married. I am not going to be married. And the Riverside guarantee, by Monday, you're going to receive documentation that the guarantee has been transferred. You won't owe Nathan anything. Silence. Then her father's voice, very quiet. Emily, what did you do? I made a choice. Another silence. When he spoke again, she could hear something in his voice that she had not heard in years. Something that was not worry or pride or love, but all three collapsed together. "You sound like yourself," he said. "You sound like yourself again." She did not answer that. She said goodnight. She set the phone down. She sat in the quiet of the room with the city dark outside the window, and she thought about what it meant to sound like yourself. How long she had not sounded that way. How gradually the silence had accumulated, how Nathan had never once said, "Don't laugh," but had said, "A little much for certain settings." Often enough that her laugh had slowly shrunk, condensed itself, learned to live in smaller spaces. She thought about Vincent on the other side of the wall. She thought about 7 years. She thought tomorrow. The knock came at 11:15. "It's me," Vincent said through the door. She had changed out of the dress Dom had brought her clothes from a bag he seemed to have prepared for this specific contingency, which was a fact she was going to need to address at some point. The specificity of all this preparation, and she was sitting cross-legged on the bed, in a plain gray shirt and dark jeans, feeling more like herself than she had in 2 years. "Come in," she said. He opened the door but stayed in the frame. "I wanted you to know Nathan issued a statement 2 hours ago. He's framing it as a medical episode. He's saying you were overwhelmed by the preparations." "Of course he is. His people are calling your phone, your work phone, and the number they have for you." "I know. You don't seem alarmed." "I am." She looked up at him. "I'm also tired. Those aren't the same thing." He was quiet. "He's going to escalate," she said. "You know that." "Yes." The medical episode story buys him a day or two of sympathy. After that, he needs another narrative. He's already building one. She nodded slowly. She had understood standing inside that bridal suite, reading his text, that leaving was only the first problem. Nathan Holloway had not constructed his position in this city over 15 years to have it dismantled quietly. He would not accept the fact of her absence. He would construct a meaning around it, a narrative, and he would use every court, every bank, every political contact he had to make that narrative real. "He's going to say I was taken," she said. Vincent's expression did not change, but something shifted in it. "He's already saying it. And you? And me." He looked at her steadily. "I am exactly who he wants me to be for that story. The crime connection, the dangerous influence, the man who lured Nathan Holloway's fiancée away from her wedding. Is that what you are?" To his audience, yes. To me, I was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the silence stopped being uncomfortable and became something else. Became the kind of quiet that exists between two people who have known each other through something real. "That's for you to decide," he said. "Not me." She looked at her hands. "You said tomorrow," she said. "For answers." "Yes. But there's one thing I want to know tonight." "All right. When you disappeared." She looked up at him. 7 years ago. When you were there and then you weren't, and I spent the first 6 months calling a phone that had been disconnected. Was there a moment when you thought about calling me? Not explaining, not coming back, just calling. To tell me you were alive." He held her gaze. "Every day." "But you didn't." "No. Because you thought it would be safer for me if you were gone." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "And it never occurred to you," she said, keeping her voice even, "to ask me whether I preferred the safety or the truth." He did not answer. She looked back at her hands. "Get some sleep," she said. "We'll talk in the morning." He nodded once. He closed the door. She sat in the quiet in a warehouse in the city she loved, wearing borrowed clothes, having just left her own wedding, and she thought about the difference between being rescued and being seen. About how many men in her life had made decisions about her safety without asking about her consent. About how love and control could look so much alike from the outside that you had to get very close to tell them apart. She thought about her own voice on the phone with her father. "You sound like yourself again." She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the city of New Orleans moved through its Saturday night music and laughter, and the smell of the river coming in through the slightly open window. And Emily Carter, 29 years old, for the first time in 2 years, did not try to make herself smaller to fit the space she was in. She breathed. The full, unguarded breath of a woman who has, at enormous cost, made a choice that belongs entirely to herself. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, there would be Nathan's anger. The phone calls, the lawyers, the public narrative he was already constructing. There would be hard conversations and harder decisions. There would be Vincent and the 7 years between them, and everything that would have to be said before any of it made sense. But right now, in this moment, the only sound was the city outside the window and the quiet of her own breathing. And for tonight, that was enough. She did not sleep. She had told herself that exhaustion alone would pull her under, that the body eventually demands what the mind refuses to allow. But she lay in the dark for 4 hours and did not sleep. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, she stopped trying. She sat up. She pulled her knees to her chest. She listened to the building settle around her, to the city outside, to the particular silence of a place that has been designed to keep things safe. And she thought about the fact that she had walked out of her own wedding wearing 11 pounds of silk, and had not once, not in any moment since, wished she had stayed. That surprised her. She had expected regret to arrive by now. The practical, grinding kind. The kind that has nothing to do with love, and everything to do with consequences. Her father's business. Her mother's careful, quiet life. The 40 employees of Carter Construction, who had no idea that the stability of their livelihoods had been routed through a single man's goodwill. But the regret did not come. What came instead was something sharper. A question she had not been able to stop asking since the car ride, since Vincent's voice in the back seat saying long enough, and it wasn't my choice to make. A question she had pushed aside for the phone calls to her parents, for the borrowed clothes, for the 11:15 conversation at the doorway, pushed aside because she needed to sleep, because she needed to think, because there was an order to things. And she had learned in the last 2 years that you did not ask every question the moment it arrived if you wanted to survive the answer. But it was 3 in the morning, and she was not sleeping. And the question was, how long? How long had he been watching? She got up and went to the window. The courtyard below was lit by low amber lights, the kind of lighting that said functional rather than beautiful. The lighting of a space designed by a person who thought about exposure and angles before they thought about aesthetics. She stood at the glass and looked down at a man she could see sitting on a bench below, not moving, just present, and she understood that this was some form of security she was not meant to notice. Vincent had built something here. That was what she kept returning to. Not the emotion of it, not the reunion, not the 7 years, not the specific ache of looking at a face she had spent 7 years trying to feel nothing about, but the sheer architecture of what he had built. The car with Dom, the untraceable phone, the Riverside contract guarantee transferred that morning like it was a line item on a to-do list, not the financial lifeline of her father's entire company. The bag of clothes in the correct size. The correct size. She turned away from the window. She pulled open the door to the room and walked down the hallway and down the stairs, and she found him exactly where she half expected to find him, at a long table in the main floor's open workspace. A laptop open, a cup of something beside it, looking like a man who also had not slept. He looked up when she appeared. "Couldn't either," she said before he could ask. "No." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down without being invited to, because she was done asking permission to occupy space. "Tell me about the clothes," she said. He blinked. Of all the things she could have opened with, that was not the one he expected. The clothes. The bag Dom had, in the car, the correct size, my passport. She folded her hands on the table. "When did you prepare that?" He looked at her for a moment. 3 months ago. She held that. 3 months ago. Yes. What happened 3 months ago? Nathan started transferring assets. Vincent's voice was even careful. The voice of a man who has thought about this conversation many times. Not large movements, small ones. The kind of restructuring you do when you're preparing to make something look like it belongs to someone else. He was shielding assets ahead of what he expected to be a legal challenge. Someone was building a case against him, and he knew it. "Someone," Emily said. Vincent said nothing. "You," she said. "Yes." She breathed once slowly through her nose. You were building a legal case against Nathan Holloway. I was funding the building of one. There's a difference. Vincent, that is not a meaningful difference. It is from a legal standpoint. I am not asking from a legal standpoint. She looked at him directly. How long were you doing that? 14 months. 14 months. She had been engaged for 22 months, which meant that for 14 of those months while she was attending gallery openings on Nathan's arm, and learning which fork he preferred at formal dinners, and slowly, methodically shrinking herself to fit the shape of the wife he required, Vincent Moretti had been somewhere in this city, in this building, building a case. Watching. And the 3 months ago, she said, when you had the bag prepared, I understood then that Nathan would accelerate his timeline, that if he was shielding assets, he was also preparing for the possibility of things moving quickly, which meant you would need to move quickly too if you decided to. He paused. If. You prepared for something I hadn't decided yet. I prepared for a possibility. That's still deciding for me. He held her gaze. I know. She stood up. Not in anger. She was past the simple geometry of anger, but because sitting felt inadequate for what she was thinking. She walked to the edge of the table and stood with her arms folded, looking at nothing in particular. Start from the beginning, she said. Not tonight's beginning. The real one. 7 years ago. He was quiet for a long time. Then, how much do you remember about the Davaro project? She remembered the Davaro project. Her father had landed the contract when Emily was 22. A large commercial development on the edge of the Garden District, the biggest job Carter Construction had ever won. Vincent had been working for the company for 18 months by then, starting as a day laborer and moving up through a combination of ability and the particular steadiness that had always made people trust him. Her father had noticed. Her father had promoted him. And then Emily had noticed in the way she had been trying not to notice since the 3rd week he was employed there. She remembered the conversation her father had come home having the night the Davaro contract was signed. His face. The relief in it after years of bids that almost broke even and jobs that barely kept the lights on. Carter Construction was going to be fine. More than fine. She had been sitting on the porch with Vincent when her father walked out to tell them. Vincent had shaken his hand like a colleague. Her father had not known yet about them. Nobody had known yet. It had been their secret wrapped in the particular sweetness of something new and entirely their own. 3 weeks later, Vincent was gone. Tell me, she said. Vincent set down the cup beside the laptop. The Davaro project attracted attention. Not the project itself, the size of it. Carter Construction was a small firm. A single contract of that scale made people ask questions. Specifically, it made a man named Gerald Fontenot ask questions. She did not know that name. Fontenot ran a labor syndicate, Vincent said. Not a union, a syndicate. He controlled material supply lines for half the commercial construction in the city, and he had a specific arrangement with most of the larger firms they paid. He provided materials at agreed rates. Everyone understood what the fees were really for. He was extorting contractors. Yes. And Carter Construction was too small to be on his radar before the Davaro contract. After it, it was too large not to be. Emily came back to the table and sat down. He approached you. Vincent looked at her steadily. He approached me because I was young and new, and he thought I was the easiest pressure point. He told me that your father had 2 choices: start paying the syndicate's fee, or watch the project fall apart from the inside. Materials delayed. Inspectors encouraged to find problems, small accidents that would add up. And you said no. I said I'd talk to your father. But you didn't. No. He was quiet for a moment. Because the night I was going to tell him, Fontenot sent 2 men to the apartment I was renting. They did not hurt me. They just made it very clear that if I said anything to anyone, to your father, to the police, to you, the consequences would not be for me. Emily was very still. They threatened my family. Specifically, your father, your mother, you. He said it flatly, without drama, in the tone of a person who has lived with a fact long enough that the horror of it has calcified into something duller. They knew everything about your family, where your mother volunteered, where you took your Thursday painting class. They were specific about what they would do. She felt something move through her chest that was not quite nausea and not quite grief. And you decided, she said slowly, that the correct response was to disappear. I decided that the correct response was to give them no reason to act. If I was gone, there was no leverage. There was nothing to threaten me with. There was me. Yes. His voice shifted on that single word carrying the weight of 7 years. There was you. And I told myself that you would be safer without the reason they needed. She looked at him. Did it occur to you that I spent the first month thinking I had done something wrong, that I went through every conversation we had, looking for the moment I pushed you away? Emily. Did it occur to you that I called your phone every day for 6 months? Yes. The word came out like it had cost him something. Every day I knew that. I still had the same number for 3 months. I heard it ring. She felt the air go out of her completely. You heard it ring, she said. Yes. And you didn't answer? No. She pressed her fingers against her eyes for a moment. Not crying, she was not going to cry. Not right now, not about this, but needing a second to put something back in order inside herself. What happened to Fontenot? She asked. He's in federal prison, has been for 4 years. Something moved across Vincent's face that was not satisfaction, but was adjacent to it. It took time. I spent the first 2 years learning how the syndicate worked, learning who the players were. I made myself useful to people who knew Fontenot, which meant making myself useful to people who operated outside the law, because that was the only way inside. You went into the underworld to destroy the man who made you leave. I went into the underworld because I didn't know any other way to keep your family safe from the outside. He looked at his hands. I told myself it was temporary. Was it? A pause. No. She sat with that. The security firm. I built it 6 years in. It's legitimate, fully licensed, federally vetted. The client list is Fortune 500. Nathan Holloway, before I understood what he was actually a referral from a client. She stared at him. Nathan was your client. For 8 months a year before you two met. The geometry of that hit her sideways. Nathan Holloway, who had entered her life at a charity gala, who had seemed to arrive from nowhere with his tailored suits and his city connections, and his perfectly practiced attentiveness. Nathan Holloway, who had known exactly which questions to ask about her family, exactly which vulnerabilities to identify, exactly how a man with access to financial infrastructure could make himself indispensable. He knew about you, she said, not a question. Not at first. He discovered the connection later who I was to you, the history. By the time I understood what he was doing to your family, he already knew enough about me to make any intervention from me look exactly like what he would want it to look like. Vincent's jaw tightened. A crime figure interfering in a respectable man's life. So you stayed back. I built the case instead, quietly, with lawyers and financial investigators and a federal contact who has been building a parallel investigation for the last 8 months. Emily was quiet for a long time. Outside, somewhere in the city, a second-line band was still moving through the streets. It had to be close to 4 in the morning, but this was New Orleans, and grief and celebration sounded the same here if you listened from far enough away. He has a son, she said. A child you didn't tell me about. Vincent looked at her. What? Nathan. There's a woman I found out 3 months before the wedding. A woman in Metairie. A child who's 4 years old. She watched his face. You didn't know. No. His expression shifted into something focused and sharp. Tell me everything you know about her. Her name is Diane Arsenault. She was a paralegal at his firm. The child's name is Nathan calls him James, which I thought was... She stopped. Which I thought was a coincidence at the time. It wasn't a coincidence. No. He named his son after my father. She said it evenly because she had spent 3 months processing exactly what that meant. That Nathan had understood her family's emotional vulnerabilities with a precision that was almost artistic, and had used that precision with the patience of a man who played very long games. Nathan named his son after the man whose company he was holding hostage. Does Diane Arsenault know what he was doing with your family? I don't know. I couldn't get close enough to find out without Nathan knowing I was asking. She looked at him. Can your people find out? He was already reaching for his phone. She watched him type a message, the speed of it, the specificity. He was not improvising. He was extending a network that was already operational, pulling on threads that had already been laid. How many people work for you? She asked. In the security firm 63. And the people who aren't in the security firm. He looked up from the phone. That's a more complicated answer. I have time. He set the phone down. The people who helped me take down Fontenot's syndicate are not employees. Some of them are still in that world. Some of them have moved out of it. What they are, all of them, is people who owe me something real, not money, not favors in the transactional sense. Something earned. He chose the word carefully. Loyalty. Is that different from what Nathan has? Yes. The word was immediate and certain. Nathan has compliance. People do what he says because he controls something they need. My people do what I ask because I once stood between them and something worse. He paused. There's a difference. It matters. She thought about that. About the difference between a man who constructs leverage and a man who earns trust. About how from the outside, both could look like power. About how the people around you could be either caged or free, and the cage could be invisible if it was built carefully enough. Vincent. She met his eyes. Did you know I was going to contact you? He was quiet for a moment. I hoped. But did you know? No. He held her gaze. I did not know. I had the options prepared because I believe in preparation. But you are the only variable I could not predict, and I never tried to. He looked down at the table. You were always going to make your own choice. I just wanted to make sure that if you chose to leave, there was somewhere to go. She sat with that for a long time. She thought about Nathan's text smile today, or your father's company disappears tomorrow, and she thought about this man sitting across from her, who had spent 7 years building something on the off chance that she would one day need a door, and she thought about the difference between those two things and what it said about the men who had occupied the largest spaces in her life. Then her phone, the untraceable one, buzzed. She picked it up. A text from an unknown number. But the message was not for her. It had been forwarded by someone in Vincent's network, a redirect from her public number. It was from Nathan. You think you're safe wherever you are. You're not. I know who took you. I know what he is. Come home by 9 a.m., and we say this never happened. After 9, I make calls. The first call ends your father's business. The second call ends Vincent Moretti's. She turned the phone around and showed it to Vincent. He read it. He did not react the way she expected, not with anger, not with calculation. Something moved through his face that she read slowly, as something closer to clarity. Like a man who has been waiting for confirmation and has now received it. He thinks this is still a negotiation, Vincent said. Isn't it? No. He looked up from the phone. A negotiation requires two parties who both have something to lose. Nathan doesn't understand yet that he has already lost. He still controls the loan guarantee. As of this morning, he does not. She stopped. The transfer, the documentation, is complete, notarized, filed with the State Commerce Office, and a copy lodged with the Federal Financial Investigation. He paused. The investigators have been waiting for Nathan to move against your father's company. It would give them the evidence of coercion they need. Emily stared at him. You've been waiting for him to threaten my family. We've been waiting for him to threaten your family in writing. Vincent held her gaze. He just did. She looked down at the phone in her hand. The text was dated. Time-stamped. Sent from a number registered to Nathan Holloway's personal account. Come home by 9 a.m. The first call ends your father's business. That text, she said slowly, is evidence of financial extortion. He nodded once. Yes. She set the phone down. She thought about Nathan at the altar this afternoon. The altar she had not reached, standing in his hand-tailored suit, among the judges and senators and business leaders he had assembled to witness his acquisition of Emily Carter. She thought about his face when she did not appear. About the moment the certainty on his face would have become something else. She thought about his text that morning inside the bridal suite smile today. Whatever you're feeling in that room right now, leave it there. He had been so certain. He was still certain now. Come home by 9 a.m. and we say this never happened. Still certain that the architecture of her life was something he controlled. That her father's livelihood, and her mother's charity, and her best friend's small boutique on Magazine Street were still the walls of a room he had locked and held the key to. He did not know about the transfer yet. He did not know that the case against him had been building for over a year. He did not know that his text sent in anger at 4 in the morning had just handed the investigators what they needed. "What happens next?" she asked. His attorney gets a call from a federal investigator Monday morning. Before he can make the calls, he's threatening. Before any of it reaches your father. And Diane Arsenault, the child. My people are reaching out tonight. She may not know the full picture. She deserves the chance to know it before things accelerate. Emily looked at him. Why does that matter to you? Because she didn't choose Nathan knowing what he was. And neither did you. He said it without softness, just as a fact. People who get caught in someone else's machine don't deserve to be treated like part of the machine. She held that for a moment. Outside the window, the second-line band had passed out of earshot, and the city had gone quiet in the way it went quiet in the hours before dawn. Not silent, never silent, but reduced to its own breathing. Emily Carter, 29 years old, 7 years removed from the last time she had sat across a table from this man, thought about machines. About the difference between the one Nathan had built, interlocking extractive, designed to run on other people's fear, and whatever this was. Whatever Vincent had built. Whether it was different enough to matter. You said last night, she said, that you watched me, that you kept watch from a distance. Yes. What did that look like? He did not answer immediately. When he did, he chose his words with the careful attention of a man who knows the difference between honesty and cruelty. I knew where you worked. I knew when you changed jobs. I knew when you started seeing Nathan, who he was, what his background was. I had someone at a distance, not inside your life, but at the edge of it, making sure... He stopped. Making sure what? Making sure you were all right. For 7 years. Yes, and you never thought that was that it crossed a line. I thought about that line every day. But you didn't stop. No. He held her gaze. Because the only thing stronger than my understanding that you had the right to a life without me in it was the thing that happened every time I thought about removing that last layer of watch and just letting go completely. What happened? He was quiet. I couldn't, he said. I know that's not the right answer. I know it's not the clean one. I'm not telling you it's fine. I'm telling you it's true. She sat with that. The truth of it. The imperfect, complicated human truth of a man who had loved someone and left to protect her, and could not for 7 years manage to do it completely. She did not tell him it was fine. She did not tell him it wasn't. She said, Nathan's deadline is 9 a.m. Yes. You said he's already lost. Does he know that yet? No. She looked at the untraceable phone on the table, at Nathan's text, at the timestamp. When he finds out, she said, he's going to look for somewhere to put the blame. Yes. He's going to put it on you. The crime connection, the dangerous influence. It's already the story he's building. Yes. Which means I can't be here when that story goes public. She looked up at Vincent. I can't be the woman who ran to the Mafia boss. I have to be the woman who made a choice. There's a difference, and the difference is going to matter in every conversation that comes next. Vincent looked at her steadily. Then tell me what you need, he said. She thought about it. A lawyer, she said. One who is not yours and not Nathan's. Someone who can verify that everything that happened tonight, the transfer, the documentation, the federal contact is clean enough that when Nathan's people go looking for leverage, they find a wall instead of a door. I know the right attorney. She needs to be independent. She is. He paused. And she has. Emily raised an eyebrow. She has what? She has been waiting for this case to be ready for 11 months. He looked at her. She's been waiting for you specifically. The geometry of the thing shifted again, expanded in a direction she had not seen. All of it for all this time, moving toward a point. Not a point Vincent had chosen for her. A point she had walked toward herself without knowing it was there, on a morning when she sat in a bridal suite and sent 3 words to a number she had never deleted. "If you still want me." She had thought she was asking a question. She understood now that she had been answering one. "Call her," Emily said. "Tell her I'm ready." The attorney's name was Margaret Fontanelle. She arrived at the warehouse at 6:45 in the morning, carrying a leather briefcase, a coffee she had clearly bought for herself and no one else, and the specific energy of a woman who had been waiting 11 months for a phone call and was not remotely surprised that it came at 5 in the morning. She was 61 years old, gray-haired, and she walked into the room where Emily was sitting and looked at her, the way a doctor looks at a patient who has finally come in after ignoring symptoms for too long, not without compassion, but without patience for delay. "You're Emily Carter," she said. "Yes." "You left your wedding yesterday." "Yes." Margaret set the briefcase on the table and sat down across from her without being invited, to which Emily immediately respected. "I need 45 minutes of your complete honesty. After that, I need you to stop talking and let me work. Can you do both of those things?" "Yes," Emily said. "Good." She snapped open the briefcase. "Start with Nathan Holloway, and don't skip anything because you think it makes you look naive. The naive parts are usually the most useful." Vincent had quietly left the room when Margaret arrived. Emily had noticed that the deliberateness of it, the way he had set his coffee cup down, and stepped out before the attorney was fully through the door, making space without being asked. She had filed it away without comment, this small specific act of restraint, and focused on Margaret. She talked for 50 minutes. Not 45-50, because the naive parts turned out to be numerous, and Margaret asked follow-up questions with the precision of someone who already knew the landscape and was simply verifying the coordinates. The financial arrangement. The Riverside guarantee. The text from the bridal suite. Nathan's 4 a.m. ultimatum. Diane Arsenault. The child named James. When Emily finished, Margaret closed her legal pad, capped her pen, and said, "He made 3 fundamental errors. Only 3. 3 that we can use immediately. The first is the text this morning. Extortion in writing is the kind of gift that usually only comes from men who are very arrogant or very frightened, and in Nathan Holloway's case, I believe it was both simultaneously." She tapped the legal pad. "The second error is Diane Arsenault. He has been concealing that relationship from his financial disclosures for 4 years. The child support payments are routed through a shell account connected to the law firm's operating expenses. That is wire fraud." Emily stared. He was paying child support with firm money. He was paying child support and calling it client entertainment. Margaret's expression did not change. "The third error is the asset transfer he conducted 3 months ago. He moved assets in anticipation of legal action, which constitutes fraudulent conveyance, and he did it in a way that left a clear digital trail because he believed no one was looking. Someone was looking. Someone was looking for 14 months. Margaret glanced toward the door where Vincent had exited. "I won't comment on the methodology, but the documentation is clean, the chain of custody is intact, and the federal investigator assigned to this case has been personally briefed. By 9 a.m. Nathan Holloway will receive a call that will make him understand that his deadline is no longer relevant." She paused. "However." Emily heard the however. However, Nathan Holloway has spent 15 years building relationships in this city. Judges, politicians, the kind of relationships that don't disappear because a federal investigation opens. The legal process will take time, and in that time he will attempt to control the narrative. She looked at Emily directly. He is already controlling it. The medical episode story. That was last night. This morning he pivoted. Margaret reached into the briefcase and produced a tablet, which she turned to face Emily. It was a statement posted to Nathan Holloway's official social media. Professionally written, warm in tone, expressing concern for Emily's well-being. Stating that she had been under significant stress. That she had disappeared in the company of a known organized crime figure. That he feared for her safety. that he was cooperating fully with law enforcement, that he prayed for her safe return. Emily read it twice. She felt something cold and clear move through her chest. "He's fast," she said. "He's been preparing for contingencies for a long time." Margaret retrieved the tablet. "Which means you need to be faster, and you need to be public." Public. He controls the private channels. He has the police contacts, the judge relationships, the political allies. What he cannot control, if you move quickly enough, is the public record. She held Emily's gaze. "I am not suggesting a press conference. I am suggesting that when the federal investigation becomes visible, which will happen within 48 to 72 hours, you are positioned as the woman who cooperated with that investigation. Not the woman who ran away. Not the woman who was taken." She paused. "The woman who came forward." Emily thought about that. She thought about Nathan's statement. She has disappeared in the company of a known organized crime figure, and she thought about how precisely he had anticipated the vulnerability. Vincent. The history. The warehouse in the warehouse district that could be made to look like anything Nathan needed it to look like. She thought about her own voice on the phone with her father at midnight. "You sound like yourself again." "All right," she said. "What do I need to do?" "Right now, nothing. Go sleep for 3 hours. You cannot think clearly, and you cannot make good decisions in this state, and I need you thinking clearly." Margaret was already standing, briefcase in hand. "I have calls to make. Vincent has people who need instructions. And Nathan Holloway is going to spend the next 4 hours believing he still has leverage, which is the most useful thing he can do for us right now." She moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Something shifted in her expression, not warmth exactly, but something in that direction. "For what it's worth," she said. "I have been waiting to take this case for 11 months. Not because of Vincent Moretti." She looked at Emily steadily. "Because I have watched Nathan Holloway do to 3 other women exactly what he did to you, and none of them had the combination of evidence and courage to let me finish it." She left before Emily could respond. Emily sat alone in the room for a moment. Then she went upstairs, lay down on the bed in her borrowed clothes, and fell asleep in under 4 minutes. She woke at 10:17 to the sound of her name, not spoken aloud. She woke the way you wake when a building's atmosphere changes, when the quality of the air in a space shifts because something outside its walls has moved. She was sitting up before she was fully conscious, reaching for the untraceable phone on the nightstand. 3 messages from Margaret. One from a number she did not recognize. She read Margaret's first. Federal contact made the call at 9:02 a.m. Nathan's attorney called back at 9:47, demanding to know the scope of investigation. They have not yet been told. Nathan's social media statement has been shared 200 times as of 10 a.m. His narrative is moving fast. Ours needs to move faster. "Call me." She called. Margaret picked up on the first ring. "Good. You're awake. We have a development." "Tell me." "Diane Arsenault contacted my office at 9:30 this morning. She saw Nathan's statement about you, and she called the number on my firm's website." A brief pause. "She wants to talk." Emily sat up straighter. "Does she know about me? About the wedding?" "She's known about you for 2 years. Nathan told her you were a political arrangement, a necessary marriage for his career that had nothing to do with their relationship." Margaret's voice was precise and dry. "She believed him. Until this morning when she saw the statement calling you unstable and endangered, and something apparently shifted." "What shifted?" She recognized the language. She said, and I'm reading from my notes, "He used those exact words about me. Unstable. Overwhelmed. When I first tried to tell someone what was happening." Another pause. "She has documentation, Emily. Texts, financial records, photographs. She's been keeping a file for 18 months because she grew up with a mother who told her to always keep a file." Emily breathed out slowly. "Diane Arsenault is not a victim he accidentally created," she said. "She's a witness he never neutralized." "Correct. And she wants to meet you." "When?" "This afternoon. Neutral location. Her choice." "Set it up," Emily said. "Tell her yes." She hung up and looked at the second message. The unknown number. Emily. This is your best friend, and I am currently standing outside a warehouse in the warehouse district wearing my good boots, and I will stand here all day if necessary. Claire. Emily almost laughed. Almost. It came up her throat and stopped just short, caught on something that was not grief exactly, but was shaped like it. Claire Thibodeau, who had been her maid of honor, who had knocked on the suite door yesterday, and said, "Nathan sent Marcus up to check on you," in a voice that had carried a specific warning Emily had understood completely. She typed back, "Side door. Tell Dom your name." 40 seconds later. Claire's response. "There is a very large man named Dom, staring at me like I'm a problem he's been asked to solve. You're not a problem. Tell him Emily sent you." 3 minutes after that, Claire was standing in the doorway of the upstairs room, and Emily was on her feet, and they held each other for a long time without speaking, the way women hold each other when the thing they most needed to say got too large for words. "I didn't know," Claire said into her shoulder, "about the Riverside contract, about how much he had on your dad. I swear to you, Emily, if I had known the full picture." "I know." Emily pulled back to look at her. "I didn't tell you the full picture." "You should have." "I know that now." Claire's eyes were red, but her jaw was set, and she looked the way she had always looked when she was angry, and being careful about it, like a woman choosing where to aim. "What can I do? Right now, sit with me while I get ready. Talk to me like a normal person for 20 minutes before everything gets very complicated again." Claire sat down on the bed. "Your dress is hanging on the back of the door," she said. "Did you know that someone steamed it?" Emily looked at the white silk hanging against the wood. She had not noticed it until this moment. 11 pounds of what was supposed to be her future, pressed and hung and waiting. "I'm not going to need it," she said. "No," Claire agreed. "You're not." They met Diane Arsenault at a coffee shop in Mid-City at 2 in the afternoon. Neutral ground. Public enough that no one could claim coercion. Private enough that the conversation could be real. Diane was 34, a former paralegal, now working as an office manager for a small nonprofit with a 4-year-old son named James, and the specific exhaustion of a woman who has been carrying a secret that is too heavy and too dangerous to put down. She was already at the table when Emily arrived. She stood when she saw her. They looked at each other across the small space between the chairs. "I'm sorry," Diane said. Not tentatively directly the way a person apologizes when they have decided that precision matters more than comfort. "I didn't know what he was doing to your family until much later, and when I started to understand it, I didn't know how to say it without—" She stopped. "Without making it worse for myself." "I know," Emily said. She sat down. "I'm not here to make anything worse for you." Diane sat back down slowly. "He told me you were fragile, that the wedding was something you needed for stability, that you were— he had a lot of words for what you were." She looked at her coffee cup. "I believed them for a long time because it was easier to believe them." "I believed his words about myself for 2 years," Emily said. "You don't have to explain that to me." Diane looked up. "I have financial records, 18 months of them. The shell account he used for the child support payments. I found it because I have a background in legal accounting, and I noticed the routing number on a document he left on my kitchen table." She opened her bag and produced a flash drive. She set it in the center of the table. "Everything is on there. I made 3 copies. One is with my sister in Baton Rouge. One is in a safety deposit box. This one is for your attorney." Emily looked at the flash drive. She thought about Nathan naming his son after her father. About the patience of it. The specific architectural cruelty of a man who names a weapon after the person it's aimed at. "His son," Emily said carefully. "James, does he know him?" Diane's jaw tightened. "He visits once a month, 45 minutes. He brings a gift every time something expensive that James is too young to care about. And then he leaves and doesn't call for 3 weeks." She paused. "He loves the idea of the child. The reality of him, the actual 4-year-old who spills his juice and asks the same question 8 times in a row. Nathan doesn't have patience for that. He never did." Emily picked up the flash drive. She held it for a moment. "This is going to become public," she said. "The investigation, the records. When it does, James's name may come up. I know. Diane met her eyes. I have already spoken to a family attorney about a protective order for his privacy. His name stays out of the public filings. That's non-negotiable. Then we agree, Emily said. She slid the drive into her jacket pocket. I'll make sure Margaret understands that condition. Diane nodded. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, and for a moment, the composure she had maintained through the conversation showed its seams, a slight trembling in her fingers, quickly controlled. Is he going to come after me? She asked. When he finds out I came to you. Emily thought about Nathan's text at 4 a.m, about the efficiency of his anger, about the way a man who has built a structure of control responds when the structure begins to give. He's going to try, she said. But the evidence you're providing is going to be part of a federal case, and the moment it's in that case coming after you becomes obstruction. She held Diane's gaze. My attorney is very good. I know who Margaret Fontenelle is, Diane said quietly. Nathan has mentioned her before. He said if he ever saw her name in a filing against him, he would know someone had been working very hard for a very long time. Someone has, Emily said. She did not say who. She did not need to. She was back at the warehouse by 4 o'clock, the flash drive with Margaret Claire fielding calls from Emily's phone to keep the line active and traceable to a location across the city. A detail Vincent's team had arranged to complicate Nathan's attempts to locate Emily through her network. It was the kind of operational precision that she had 24 hours ago no frame of reference for, and that she was now absorbing as simply the texture of the situation she was in. Vincent was in the main workspace when she came back. He was on a call speaking in a low voice, and he looked up when she walked in and held up one finger a minute, and she nodded and sat down and waited. She listened to his half of the conversation without being able to hear the other end. No, don't move on that yet. He needs to believe the deadline mattered. Pause. I understand that. I'm telling you to wait. Longer pause. Because if we move before Fontenelle has the Arsenault documents in front of the federal investigator, we give him a gap to work with, and I am not giving him a gap. He listened. Monday, not before. He ended the call. He looked at her. Arsenault. She gave us everything. Emily set her jacket on the chair. 18 months of financial records. The Shell account documentation. She's requesting privacy protections for the child's name in the public filings. That's reasonable. I already told her yes. He nodded once. He was looking at her with the same attention he had always given her, not the attention of a man cataloging a woman, but the attention of someone reading a person they care about accurately without wanting to change what they read. You're doing well, he said. Don't. Don't what? Don't tell me how I'm doing. I'm not doing well or badly. I'm doing what needs to be done. She met his eyes. You can tell me I'm handling it when it's over. He accepted that with a small nod. Her phone buzzed, the real one which Claire was managing from across the city. Claire had sent a screenshot. Nathan had posted again. This statement was longer, less warm. It named Vincent Moretti explicitly. It referenced organized crime connections and a pattern of coercive behavior toward vulnerable individuals. It named 2 previous criminal investigations, both dismissed, but the names were there, and it ended with a paragraph expressing Nathan's hope that the relevant authorities would act swiftly to ensure Emily's safety. At the bottom, I love Emily Carter. I will do whatever it takes to bring her home safely. The post had been shared 11,000 times in 2 hours. Emily read it standing up, holding the phone, and she felt the anger arrive, not the hot, destabilizing kind, but the cold, useful kind, the kind that clarifies rather than obscures. He just called you a predator in front of 11,000 people, she said. Yes. And you're not going to respond? No. Because responding validates the frame. He agreed. His story works if I'm the dangerous figure in it. The moment I respond publicly, I become the dangerous figure. She put the phone down. What does your attorney say? Margaret is also mine technically, or was until this morning. He said it without particular emphasis. She told me the same thing. Stay invisible. Let the investigation speak. And when does the investigation speak? The federal investigator releases a statement acknowledging the case Monday morning. By then, Nathan's legal team will have been notified of the scope. They'll know that fighting it publicly makes it worse. He paused. Nathan is a very intelligent man, Emily. When he understands he can't win in court, he'll shift. He'll try to negotiate a settlement that minimizes the public exposure. What happens when he tries to negotiate? Margaret tells him the terms. What are the terms? Vincent looked at her steadily. That's not my decision. She stared at him. The terms of any settlement, any negotiation, any arrangement that comes out of this, those are yours, your family's, Diane Arsenault's. He held her gaze. Not mine. I funded an investigation. I am not owed a piece of the outcome. She was quiet for a moment. That's the part I keep coming back to, she said finally. Which part? The part where you spent 14 months, and what I assume was a significant amount of money, and you don't seem to want anything back. I want you to be free of him. That's not nothing. No. But it's not the same as wanting something from you. He said it plainly without performance. I know the difference. I know you do, she said. That's the part I keep coming back to. At 7 in the evening, Nathan Holloway called her real phone. Claire, managing it across the city, sent the screenshot of the incoming call. Emily called her immediately. Let it go to voicemail, Emily said. Already did. He left one. Play it. Claire held the phone to her speaker. Nathan's voice came through and he sounded different. The polish was still there, the control, but underneath it was something that sounded almost like disorientation. Like a man who has pressed the button that always opens the door and found the door was not there. Emily, I don't know what he's told you or what you think you know, but I need you to hear my voice and remember who I am to you. We built something real. What we have is real. Whatever evidence anyone is showing you, whatever story they're constructing, I need you to come and let me explain it myself. I know you're scared. I know this feels... A pause. Something that almost sounded like genuine emotion, or a very practiced version of it. I love you. Whatever is happening, that is real. Call me back. The recording ended. The three of them. Emily, Claire on the phone. Vincent standing nearby were silent for a moment. Then Claire said, He sounds scared. He sounds like a man who just found out the door isn't there anymore, Emily said. Do you want to call him back? Claire asked. No. The word was immediate and certain. I have nothing to say to him right now that my attorney hasn't already said or is about to say. She paused. But Claire, saved the voicemail. Don't delete it. Already on it. She hung up. She looked at Vincent. The scared ones are more dangerous, she said. You know that. Yes. When he realizes the settlement terms aren't going to give him what he wants, he escalates again. That's his pattern. She thought about what Diane had said. He used those exact words about me and about the three women Margaret had mentioned, the ones who hadn't had the combination of evidence and courage. Nathan Holloway had been doing this for a long time. The pattern was clear if you knew to look for it. His next move, she said. What do you think it is? Vincent sat down across from her. He goes after your credibility through your history. The things that make you look unreliable in front of a judge or a jury. Your relationship with me 7 years ago and now. Any moment in the last 2 years where he can argue you behaved erratically. I've been carefully not erratic for 2 years, she said. He trained me into it. I know. But the training doesn't look the way he needs it to look. He needs instability in the record. Since there isn't any, he'll try to create it. How? By provoking a reaction from you. Vincent held her gaze. He's going to say or do something designed to make you respond publicly and emotionally. If you do, he has his evidence. If you don't, he has nothing. He has nothing. She thought about this post. 11,000 shares. Whatever it takes to bring her home safely. The language of a man who has cast himself as the hero of a story where she is the thing that needs saving. He called me home, she said. Like I'm a place he owns. Yes. I'm not going back there. I know. She looked at him across the table. In the low light in the borrowed clothes 24 hours removed from the bridal suite and the text and the lock on the door. She looked at the face of a man she had once loved with the entirety of what she was, and she thought about the conversation. They still had not finished the one that started last night at 3 in the morning, and had been interrupted by Margaret and Claire and Diane Arsenault and 11,000 social media shares. There was still so much to say. There was still the matter of 7 years of a surveillance she had not consented to, of preparation and loyalty, and the difference between protection and possession. All of it still sitting in the space between them. Patient waiting for the moment when the immediate danger was far enough away to be examined. They were not there yet, but she could feel it getting closer. "I need to call my father again," she said. "He needs to know about the Monday timeline." Of course. She picked up the untraceable phone. She paused before dialing. "Vincent." She looked up at him. "When this is over, and it is going to be over, I'm going to make sure of that. We need to finish the conversation." "I know. All of it. Not just the parts that make you look better." He met her eyes without flinching. "I know." She held his gaze for one more second. Then she dialed her father. And in the building around her, in the city outside, in the offices of Margaret Fontenelle and the federal investigator, whose name she still did not know, everything that had been set in motion 24 hours ago in a bridal suite continued to move quiet, precise, and far too advanced now for any single man's anger to stop it. Nathan Holloway had built his life on the belief that he controlled every room he entered. He had never once considered what would happen if the room itself had been waiting for him. Now it was. And Monday was coming. Monday came the way consequential days always come, without ceremony, without warning in the air. Just an ordinary morning that happened to contain the moment everything changed. Emily was awake before 6. She had slept 4 hours, which was 2 more than the night before, and she counted that as progress. She was sitting at the long table in the main workspace with coffee and Margaret's latest briefing document, when Vincent came downstairs, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Just two people who had not slept enough, occupying the same quiet before the day required something from them. "Margaret called at 5:30, he said. "I know. I was already up." He poured coffee and sat across from her. "The investigator releases the statement at 9. "I know that too." He looked at her. "How are you?" "I'm waiting," she said. "That's what I am right now. Everything else I'll figure out after 9. He nodded and said nothing more, which was exactly the right thing. At 8:53, Margaret called Emily directly. 6 minutes, she said. "I want you off social media, off your public phone, and away from any screen that Nathan's people might be monitoring for your reaction. When the statement drops, he's going to watch for your response before he decides his next move. I won't give him one. I know you won't. I'm telling you anyway because I tell all my clients the same thing, and the ones who listen make my job easier." A brief pause. "Your father's attorney has been briefed. The Riverside documentation has been officially entered into the federal record. Nathan cannot touch that company. It is done." Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. He still has allies. This morning ends one fight and starts 3 more. Be ready for that." The call ended. She set the phone on the table. She looked at Vincent. "Did you hear that?" "Yes." 3 more fights." "At least," he said. At 9:02, Emily's phone lit up with a text from Claire across the city. "It's out." And then, as if the city itself had been waiting, everything moved at once. Nathan's attorney called Margaret at 9:47. Emily was in the room when Margaret took the call on speaker, a decision Margaret made without asking, simply setting the phone on the table and pressing the button, which Emily understood as a form of deliberate inclusion. "You are part of this. You hear everything." The attorney's name was Breckenridge. He had a voice like expensive wood, dense, polished, designed to resonate in large rooms. He said the word misunderstanding 4 times in the first 90 seconds. Margaret said, "There is no misunderstanding, counsel. There is a federal investigation, a documented pattern of financial coercion. 18 months of records from a secondary victim and a written extortion threat sent at 4 in the morning, the day of the incident. I'm happy to go through each item individually if that would help. A pause on Breckenridge's end. My client is willing to discuss terms. Your client's willingness to discuss terms is noted and appreciated, Margaret said. My client's terms are as follows. Nathan Holloway surrenders his bar license voluntarily and cooperates fully with the federal investigation. He makes no further public statements about Emily Carter, her associates, or her family. He releases all financial leverage over Carter Construction formally, and in writing notarized filed with the State Commerce Office by close of business Friday. And he has no further contact with Emily Carter, direct or indirect, for the remainder of these proceedings. Silence. Those are not negotiating terms, Breckenridge said. Those are terms of surrender. Yes, Margaret said pleasantly. They are. Another silence longer. I'll need to consult with my client. Of course. You have until Wednesday at noon. After that, the cooperation window closes and the federal case proceeds without any arrangement. She picked up the phone and took it off speaker. Have a good morning, counsel. She ended the call. She looked at Emily. He'll fight the bar license surrender. I know. He'll try to negotiate that piece specifically. He's spent 15 years building his professional identity. The license is who he is. Then it's the right thing to take, Emily said. Margaret looked at her for a moment with something that was not quite a smile, but was in that vicinity. Yes, she said. It is. The call she had not been prepared for came at 11:15. Not from Nathan. Not from Breckenridge. From a number she recognized as belonging to Senator Arthur Delacroix, 64 years old. 3 terms in the Louisiana State Senate. A man who had sat in the third row at the wedding ceremony and whose name appeared on Nathan's client list in the financial records Margaret had spent the weekend reviewing. She showed the screen to Vincent. He looked at it. Don't answer. I know. She watched it ring. But I want to know what he wants. I wants to know how far the investigation goes, whether his name is in it. Is it? Vincent was quiet for a moment. His name is in correspondence, not in the financial records directly. Whether the federal investigation expands to include him depends on what they find in Nathan's cooperation. So he's calling to find out if he needs to be scared. Yes. She let it go to voicemail. The senator did not leave one which told her everything she needed to know about how frightened he was. Men who are confident leave messages. Men who are afraid hang up and wait to see which way the wind blows. How many people knew, she asked, about what Nathan was doing? Not the specifics, just that something was wrong. Vincent sat with that question. More than should have, he said finally. And nobody said anything. Nobody said anything because Nathan Holloway was useful to them. And usefulness in this city covers a great many things. He looked at her. That's not an excuse. I'm telling you the shape of what you're dealing with. I know the shape, she said. I lived inside it for 2 years. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was moving through an ordinary Monday traffic deliveries. People walking to work with coffee in their hands, completely unaware that somewhere in the warehouse district, a woman in borrowed clothes was watching the architecture of someone's power begin to come apart. He named his son after my father, she said. It came out quieter than she intended. I know. I keep thinking about that. What kind of mind does that? What kind of person looks at a child and says, I'll name him after the man I'm controlling as a reminder to myself of what I own? Nathan doesn't think in terms of people, Vincent said. He thinks in terms of positions. Your father was a position. You were a position. Even his son is a position. The family man optics the next generation of Holloway respectability. His voice was flat, not angry, just accurate. People who think that way can be very convincing for a very long time because they're incredibly good at mimicking what people want to see. He was convincing, she said. For a long time he was convincing. He convinced people who are far more experienced than you. That's not the comfort you think it is. I know, he said. It's not meant to be. It's just true. She turned from the window. She looked at him standing in the middle of the room, and she thought now. The immediate danger was far enough away. The Monday machinery was running. Margaret had it. The federal investigation had it. Her father's company was protected. Diane Arsenault's documents were in the right hands. Claire was managing communications. Dom was managing everything else. The room was as quiet as it was going to be. "Sit down," she said. Something in his expression shifted. He sat. She sat across from him. "I need to say something to you," she said, "and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" "Yes." She looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up and held his gaze because this conversation deserved eye contact. "When I was 22 years old," she said, "I loved you. Not the careful, hedged kind of love that you develop after you've been hurt. The full kind. The kind where you are not protecting any part of yourself because it hasn't occurred to you yet that you might need to." She paused. "You were the first person I ever loved who made me feel like the full version of myself was acceptable. Not the quieter version. Not the more appropriate version. All of it." He said nothing. He was listening the way she had asked him to. "And then you were gone," she said. "And I spent 6 months calling a disconnected number, and another 6 months convincing myself I had done something wrong, and then 3 years rebuilding. And I want to be honest with you about what that rebuilding looked like, because I think you have a version of it in your head that is probably cleaner than the reality." "Tell me," he said quietly. "I was angry," she said. "For a long time, underneath everything, I was furious. Not just sad furious, because the anger was something I could hold on to, and the grief was something I was afraid would swallow me whole if I let it fully in." She breathed. "And then Nathan arrived, and I will tell you the honest truth about why I stayed with him past the point where I should have left. It wasn't just the leverage. It was that I had already learned from you that love could disappear overnight without explanation. And some part of me had decided that a man who stayed, even if he stayed for the wrong reasons, was safer than a man who might leave." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I'm not saying that to wound you," she said. "I'm saying it because you asked for honesty, and that is the honest thing." "I know," he said. The words came out rough, like they had cost something. "Nathan wanted to own my future," she continued. "He wanted to hold the deed to it. Every decision I made, every smile, every word in public, he wanted his name on all of it." She paused. "And what you did, the watching, the preparation, the riverside transfer, the bag, with the correct clothes in the correct size, it was not the same thing. I want to be clear that I know it was not the same thing." "But," he said, "but you also made decisions about my life without asking me. For 7 years you decided what I needed, what was safe, what should happen at the edges of my world, without once saying to me, 'Emily, here is what I know, here is what I see. What do you want to do about it?'" Her voice stayed level, but the weight behind it was real. "Nathan wanted to own my future. You decided it for me. Those aren't the same thing. But neither one is love." The word landed in the room like something physical. He did not deflect it. He did not explain. He looked at her and said, "You're right. I know I'm right. I know you know." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his voice dropped into something she had not heard from him yet. In these 2 days, something stripped of the operational calm, the careful precision. Something that sounded like a man who is no longer managing his own pain, just feeling it. "I told myself every time that I was protecting you, that the watching was for your safety, that the preparation was just being thorough. And all of that was true, Emily. Every word of it was true." He paused. "And it was also true that I could not let go. That every time I thought about stepping back completely, about giving you a life that had no thread connecting back to me, I couldn't make myself do it. And I dressed that up in the language of protection because it was less terrifying than the real language." "What's the real language?" He was quiet for a moment. "I was afraid," he said, "that if I stopped watching, something would happen to you that I could have prevented. And I was afraid that if I stopped watching, I would have no connection to you at all. And both of those fears lived in the same body, and I never once separated them out and looked at them honestly." He met her eyes. "I should have. You deserved that from me. A long time ago." Emily sat with that. She had expected defensiveness. She had prepared for the argument, for the version of this conversation where he explained the logic of his choices, until the logic was airtight and the feeling was irrelevant. She had not prepared for this. For a man sitting across a table and simply agreeing that he had been wrong, without caveat, without architecture around it. She felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Not fully. The full version of that was going to take longer than 2 days and one honest conversation. But something adjacent to it. The first movement toward it. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," she said. "I know. And I'm not going to tell you it cancels everything else. What you built, the case, the protection that was real, even when the form of it was wrong." She looked at him steadily. "I'm going to tell you that this is the most honest conversation I have had with a man in 7 years. And I don't know yet what that means for what comes next, but it means something." He nodded once. "Can I say one more thing?" he asked. "Yes. I'm sorry. Not for leaving." I still believe that was the only option I could see at 23, and if I had known more, I might have found another way, but I didn't know more, and I made the best choice I could with what I had. He held her gaze. "I'm sorry for every year after that. For every year I kept watching without speaking. For every decision I made about your life that should have been yours to make. For the bag of clothes in the correct size." A slight painful pause. "That specifically, that I'm sorry for." She almost laughed. Almost. It came up her throat, and this time it did come out, not a full laugh, but a sound that was surprised and genuine, and very slightly undone. "The bag of clothes," she said. "The bag of clothes," he said, and there was something in his face that was not quite a smile, but was close enough. She shook her head. Then the real laugh came, brief and real and complicated, and she pressed her fingers over her mouth, and he watched her with an expression she could not name. Relief, she thought. The specific relief of a person who has braced for the worst of a conversation and found at the end of it that they were still in the same room. "Okay," she said when the laugh had passed. "Okay. Okay, we're not finished, but okay." She straightened in the chair. "Now tell me about the 3 more fights Margaret mentioned, because I need to be useful, and I am done sitting in this building, waiting for things to happen to me." The first fight was public narrative. Nathan's social media had gone quiet since the federal statement dropped, but his allies had not. Senator Delacroix, who had not left a voicemail, had given an interview to a local news outlet, expressing concern about the federal investigation's scope and suggesting that politically motivated targeting was a pattern worth examining. 2 of Nathan's law partners had released a statement expressing full confidence in his character. A political blogger with 12,000 followers had published a piece suggesting Emily Carter's disappearance was consistent with manipulation by organized crime elements. Emily read all of it in a single sitting and felt the anger arrive again, cold, useful, clarifying. "He has a machine," she said. "He's running it." "Yes," Vincent said. "And the machine is good. He built it carefully." "Can we dismantle it?" "Not directly, not without feeding it." He sat across from her. "The machine runs on attention. If we respond to each piece, the blogger, the law partners, Delacroix, we're giving them the engagement that makes the story live longer. So we let it run. We let it run while the federal case builds. Every day that passes, the machine has less to work with. By Friday, when Nathan's cooperation timeline is up, his allies are going to be very interested in protecting themselves. Delacroix doesn't want his name in the federal record. The law partners don't want an investigation of firm finances. They'll go quiet. And the blogger will follow the story wherever it goes. Right now, the story is Nathan's version. By next week, the story will be the federal case, and the blogger will write about that instead." He paused. "People who run those operations are not loyal to the subject. They're loyal to the traffic." She understood that. She understood it in the specific way you understand something when you have spent 2 years watching a man carefully manage his public image and use other people's platforms to extend it. "I want to do something," she said. "I need to do something. I cannot sit here while his machine runs and feel like I'm waiting to be rescued." "What do you want to do?" She had been thinking about this since the conversation with Diane Arsenault. Since Diane had set the flash drive on the table and said, I have been keeping a file for 18 months because I grew up with a mother who told me to always keep a file. Since Margaret had mentioned 3 other women who hadn't had the combination of evidence and courage. I want to talk to those 3 women, she said. The ones Margaret mentioned. Vincent was still. She said 3 women. Nathan did this before to other people. Maybe not the same structure, maybe not the same leverage, but the same pattern. She looked at him. If they're willing to talk. If they want to be part of the record. Emily, if this becomes a multi-complainant case. It becomes harder for Nathan to dismiss as a personal dispute, she said. I know, that's why I want to do it. He looked at her for a long moment. That is your decision, he said. Not mine. I'm not going to tell you whether to do it. I know you're not. She met his eyes. I'm telling you what I've decided. I need you to tell me whether your people can help me reach them safely and without Nathan's network finding out before we're ready. A beat. Yes, he said. We can do that. The second fight arrived that evening in a form no one had anticipated. Margaret called at 6:47, and her voice, which Emily had come to associate with the particular calm of someone who processed crisis. The way other people processed weather sounded different. Tight. Controlled, but tight. Nathan's team filed an emergency motion this afternoon, she said. They're arguing that you were coerced into leaving the wedding, that the evidence of financial extortion, the text, the records, was manufactured as part of a scheme to entrap Nathan Holloway. They're naming Vincent Moretti as the architect of the entrapment. Emily went very still. On what basis? On the basis of his history with organized crime, his past association with the Fontenot Syndicate, the fact that he had an existing personal relationship with you and a documented professional relationship with Nathan. Margaret paused. It's thin. It's very thin. But it's enough to create a delay in the federal proceedings while the motion is reviewed, which is all it needs to do. A delay gives Nathan time to move assets he hasn't moved yet, and pressure witnesses he hasn't pressured yet. How long is the delay? 10 days minimum, possibly 3 weeks. Emily walked into the hallway outside the main workspace. She needed to think without Vincent in her immediate sightline. What do we need to defeat the motion? She said. A declaration from you, on the record. Detailed account of the coercion you experienced, the Riverside threat, the wedding text, the 2 years of financial control. Documented in a format that makes it absolutely clear you acted of your own volition and that the evidence was not manufactured. Margaret's voice steadied. I can draft the framework, but it needs to come from you. Your words, your account, not mine. When? I need it by tomorrow morning. Emily looked at the wall. She thought about sitting down with Margaret and going through every moment of 2 years. The careful shrinking, the learned silence, the laugh that had gotten smaller and smaller until it almost fit in a room. She thought about putting all of that into a legal document and having it become part of a federal record that Nathan's attorneys would spend weeks trying to dismantle. She thought about the alternative. 10 days, 3 weeks. Nathan moving what he could, pressuring who he could, his machine running uninterrupted while the case sat in procedural suspension. I'll do it tonight, she said. Have the framework ready in an hour. She went back into the workspace. Vincent looked at her face and asked nothing. He filed a motion to delay the federal case, she said. Entrapment argument. He's using your history against you. His expression did not change, but something moved in his eyes. I expected that. You expected it. It was the logical move. His attorney is good. If I were advising against myself, that's the play I would make. He paused. What does Margaret need? A declaration from me. Tonight. She sat down and pulled Margaret's laptop toward her. And I need you to leave the room. He raised his eyebrows. Not because I don't trust you, she said. Because this declaration needs to be mine. Every word of it. And if you're in the room, I'm going to be aware of you reading it as I write it, and I'm going to make choices about what to include based on how you'll receive it, and I can't afford to do that. She looked at him directly. This is the part where I need to work alone. He held her gaze, then he stood up. I'll be upstairs, he said. He left. She opened Margaret's framework document. She began to write. She wrote for 3 hours. Not the legal language. Margaret would handle that layer, the translation of feeling into admissible fact. What Emily wrote was the raw account in her own voice of 2 years, inside a structure she had not initially recognized as a structure. The first time Nathan had suggested her laugh was a little much. The dinner where she had asked about the Riverside bid. The text on the morning of the wedding. The voicemail he had left Sunday. Whatever is happening that is real in the voice of a man who used the word love the way other people used a key. She wrote about the Riverside guarantee and what it had meant to know her father's company was contingent on her compliance. She wrote about the specific texture of making herself smaller, not once dramatically, but over hundreds of small moments, each individually dismissible, each one filing a corner off the person she had been at 22. She wrote about sending 3 words to a number she had never deleted. She wrote, "I acted of my own volition. No one manufactured the evidence of my coercion." Nathan Holloway's own words, sent from his own phone at 4 in the morning, are the evidence. I am requesting that this declaration be read as the testimony of a woman who made a free choice, the first fully free choice she had made in 2 years. She sent it to Margaret at 9:43. She sat in the quiet of the workspace for a long moment after. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Vincent, lighter than Vincent, quicker. Claire appeared in this doorway with takeout bags and the expression of someone who has decided that no crisis is too large to be marginally improved by food. "Dom let me in," she said. "I brought gumbo. Don't argue with me." Emily looked at her best friend. "I wasn't going to argue," she said. Claire set the bags down and sat across from her and began unpacking without ceremony, and they ate together in the half-lit workspace, talking about something that had nothing to do with Nathan or Vincent, or federal investigations, talking about Claire's boutique, about a new fabric supplier she had found, about the customer who had come in last Tuesday, asking for a dress in a color that did not exist, and had somehow gotten Claire to order a custom dye. Normal things. Small, real, continuing things. Emily felt something in her shoulders release that she had not known was held. "I missed this," she said. "I know." Claire did not look up from her gumbo. "You've been missing things for 2 years. I know that now." "You knew it then, too." Claire said it without accusation, just fact. "You just didn't think you were allowed to miss them." Emily set down her fork. She thought about her mother's voice on the wedding night phone call. "I know. I have known for months." About her father saying, "You sound like yourself again." About all the people who had been watching her disappear and not known how to hand her the door. "Claire," she said. "Yeah. When this is over, when the case is done, and Nathan is dealt with, and my father's company is secure, I'm going to do something. Something that isn't about Nathan at all." "What kind of something?" "I don't know the full shape of it yet. But I've been thinking about Diane Arsenault and her file that she kept for 18 months. And Margaret's 3 women who didn't have the evidence. And every woman who stays inside something wrong because the exits have been quietly, systematically bricked over." She looked at her friend. "I want to build something that helps with that. Something real, not symbolic." Claire was quiet for a moment. I'm in, she said. "I haven't told you what it is. Doesn't matter." Claire looked at her steadily. "I'm in." Emily picked her fork back up. Outside the city moved through its Monday evening carrying its ordinary weight. And in a building in the warehouse district, a woman who had spent 2 years learning to make herself smaller was sitting with her best friend eating gumbo, thinking about what it would look like to build something large. She did not yet know the full shape of it. But she knew it was coming, and for the first time in a very long time, the future felt like a place that belonged to her. Margaret defeated the entrapment motion on a Thursday. Not in 3 weeks. Not in 10 days. In 4. She had walked into the federal building on Wednesday morning, carrying Emily's declaration. Diane Arsenault's 18 months of financial records and a supplementary filing that Emily had not known about until the night before, a statement from 3 additional women compiled with their full consent, documenting a pattern of financial coercion and reputational manipulation that predated Nathan Holloway's relationship with Emily by 6 years. Margaret had found them. She had spent 11 months finding them. And when Emily had said sitting in the warehouse on Monday evening that she wanted to talk to those women, Margaret had looked at her with that expression that was not quite a smile and said, "They already want to talk to you." Emily had not known what to do with that, so she had said thank you and meant it completely. The federal judge, reviewing the entrapment motion, read. Emily's declaration reviewed the pattern documentation and dismissed Nathan's motion in under 48 hours with a written opinion that used the phrase demonstrably unsupported twice and bad faith filing once. Breckenridge called Margaret within the hour. His voice had lost the expensive wood resonance. It sounded like a man standing in a room that had gotten very small. "My client would like to revisit the terms," he said. "My client's terms have not changed," Margaret said. She was standing in the main workspace of the warehouse, and Emily was sitting 4 feet away, listening. "Bar license, cooperation, release of financial leverage, no contact, by Friday close of business." A long pause. "The bar license is non-negotiable," Margaret said. "It has been non-negotiable since Monday. It will be non-negotiable on Friday. If your client would like to discuss the sequencing of the other items, I'm available Thursday morning at 10. She ended the call. She looked at Emily. "He's going to agree." "How do you know?" "Because Breckenridge just told me without using any of those words that Nathan's political allies have stopped returning his calls." She picked up her legal pad. "When the machine stops, the man running it has nothing left." Emily met the 3 women on Wednesday afternoon. She had not known what to expect. She had built a version of them in her imagination, women who looked like she had looked for the past 2 years, smaller versions of themselves, the particular posture of a person who has learned to take up less space. What she found was something more complicated and more real. Their names were Sandra, Patricia, and Louise. Sandra was 47, a commercial real estate developer who had done business with Nathan's firm 8 years ago and had spent 3 years trying to recover contracts he had quietly redirected after their professional relationship soured. Patricia was 53, a former city council candidate whose campaign Nathan had funded and then systematically defunded when she refused to vote in alignment with his interests. Louise was 61, a retired attorney who had once been Nathan's mentor and who had spent 4 years watching him use connections she had introduced him to in ways she had not intended and could not easily disavow. They sat around a table in Margaret's conference room and looked at each other, and Emily thought about the specific silence of women who have been carrying the same weight in separate rooms and have just been placed in the same space for the first time. 29? He started on me when I was 39. I thought I was old enough to see it coming. She picked up her coffee cup. "You're not going to tell me you're sorry about that?" "No," Emily said. "I'm not." Sandra nodded once with a respect that felt like it had been earned through the brevity. "Good, then let's talk." They talked for 2 hours. Not about Nathan specifically, about pattern. About the specific architecture of a man who identifies leverage before he identifies a target, who builds dependency before he builds relationship, who uses the language of partnership and support and love and professional loyalty as cover for a structure that is at its foundation about control. About how each of them had seen pieces of it, and not the whole shape, because the shape was only visible when you put all the pieces together in the same room. "He's been doing this for at least 15 years, Patricia said at one point. "We know that now, but when you're inside it, you think you're the only one. You think it's specific to you, your weakness, your failure of judgment, your mistake. That's by design," Louise said. She said it with the flatness of someone who had spent years as an attorney and understood the mechanics of isolation. "He keeps each situation separate. He never lets the subjects compare notes. Because if you compare notes, you see the pattern, and if you see the pattern, you see him clearly." "We're comparing notes now," Emily said. Louise looked at her. Something moved in her expression. Old guilt. Emily thought the specific guilt of a person who knows they contributed to something they did not intend. "I introduced him to half the people in this city," she said. "When he was 28 and ambitious and very, very good at making you feel like you were doing something important by helping him." "I know," Emily said. You're not going to tell me that's not my fault. I'm not going to tell you anything about your fault, Emily said. I'm going to tell you that the statement you're willing to give is the thing that closes the door behind him. So that the next woman he finds, the next Sandra or Patricia or Louise or Emily, doesn't get 3 years into it before she understands what she's inside. Louise was quiet for a moment. Then she opened the folder she had brought with her and slid it across the table. 14 years of documentation, she said. I kept everything. I didn't know why for most of it. Now I know. Emily put her hand flat on the folder. She thought about Diane Arsenault's mother telling her to always keep a file. She thought about the specific, unglamorous wisdom of women who have learned through experience that the record matters, that paper matters, that the truth needs a home that survives memory. Thank you, she said. Nathan agreed to the terms on Friday at 4:58 in the afternoon, 2 minutes before Margaret's deadline. Emily knew because Margaret called her, and Margaret's voice had in it the particular quality of a woman who expected to win and did win, and is still allowing herself exactly one moment of satisfaction before moving to the next item. Bar license surrender filed with the State Bar, Margaret said. Cooperation agreement signed. Financial release documentation notarized and filed. No contact order in place. A brief pause. It's done. Emily was sitting on the floor of her parents' living room when the call came. She had moved back home 3 days ago. Not to the apartment she had shared with Nathan, which she would never enter again, but to her parents' house in Uptown, the house she had grown up in, the house where her father had built bookshelves himself in the living room when she was 7, and her mother had planted jasmine outside the back door that was still there, still blooming, still filling the back of the house with a smell that meant exactly one thing to Emily, which was, you are safe, you are home. Nothing has to be performed here. Her father was sitting in the armchair across from her when the call came. He had been reading or pretending to read, and when she lowered the phone, he looked at her over the top of his glasses and did not ask, just waited. It's done, she said. He set the book down. He looked at her for a long moment. Her father, 62 years old, who had built a company with his hands and had shaken the wrong man's hand at a charity gala, and had spent 3 years watching his daughter carry the weight of a decision that should never have been hers to carry. His face did something complicated and private, the face of a man feeling something too large to be expressed in the available language. Then he said, "Come here." She got up off the floor and crossed the room, and he stood up and held her, the way he had held her when she was 7, and the world had been very loud and very much. Just completely without qualification. She let herself be held. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." "You didn't know." "I should have asked more questions." "Dad." She pulled back to look at him. "You would have done anything I asked. That was the problem. I wasn't asking. I was deciding that protecting you mattered more than telling you the truth." She held his gaze. "That's on me. We both made the mistake of trying to protect each other instead of talking to each other." Her father looked at her for a long moment. "You sound like your mother," he said. "That's the best thing you've ever said to me." He laughed, a real one. The loud, undignified laugh she had inherited, and Nathan had spent 2 years trying to reduce, and she laughed too, and her mother appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, holding a dish towel, and looking at the two of them with an expression of pure, exhausted relief. "I assume something happened," her mother said. "It's done," Emily said. Her mother set down the dish towel and walked across the room and joined the two of them, and they stood in the living room of the house where Emily had grown up, in front of the bookshelves her father had built beside the window, where her mother's jasmine pushed its smell through the screens, and held each other for a long time. Outside, the Friday afternoon moved through Uptown, the way it always had, children on bikes, someone mowing a lawn, 2 houses down. The ordinary, continuing, indifferent beauty of a neighborhood that had no idea what had just ended. 3 weeks later, Nathan Holloway's bar license was officially suspended, pending the federal investigation's completion. The political machine that had spent a week running his narrative went quiet. Not all at once, but piece by piece, the way things go quiet when the source of their energy is cut. Senator Delacroix stopped giving interviews. The law partners' statement disappeared from their firm website. The political blogger pivoted to writing about the federal case itself, as Vincent had predicted, loyal to the traffic. Nathan's social media went dark on a Tuesday without announcement. Emily did not check it after that. She had better things to look at. The idea had started with a conversation over gumbo on a Monday night in a warehouse, and by the time October arrived, it had become something with a name and a structure and a small office in the Garden District that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She called it the Open Door Foundation. The name was Claire's idea, offered at 2 a.m. over the phone, while Emily was trying to write the mission statement and kept getting tangled in language that was too formal for what she actually meant. "What does it do in one sentence?" Claire had said. "Not the legal version, the real version. It helps women find the door when someone's been quietly bricking it over." "Then call it that. Call it Open Door. Everyone knows what a door means." The foundation's initial focus was threefold: legal support for women navigating financial coercion in domestic and professional relationships, counseling services, specializing in the specific psychological architecture of control, the kind that doesn't leave marks, the kind that works by degrees, the kind that makes you believe the diminishment is your own preference, and documentation teaching women the specific unglamorous practice of keeping records, the kind of records that survive memory, the kind that Louise had kept for 14 years without knowing why. Sandra came on as a board member in September. Patricia connected the foundation to 3 city council contacts who were, now that Nathan Holloway's network had lost its current, interested in being on the right side of something. Louise wrote a check that made Emily sit down when she opened the envelope. "You didn't have to do this," Emily told her on the phone. "I introduced him to half this city," Louise said. "This is how I introduce him to the door on his way out." Diane Arsenault brought James to the foundation's opening event. He was 4 years old and extremely interested in the catering table, and not remotely interested in the speeches, which Emily thought was the correct set of priorities. She watched him from across the room. This small person, who had been given her father's name as a power play, who had no idea who was just a child, eating a small sandwich with full concentration. And she felt something that was not anger and not grief, but was clear and purposeful. She went over and crouched down to his level. "Hi," she said. He looked at her with the frank, unfiltered attention that belongs entirely to 4-year-olds. "You have red shoes," he said. "I do," she agreed. "I like them." "Thank you. I like them too." He went back to his sandwich. She stood up and found Diane beside her. "He's extraordinary," Emily said. "He's a lot," Diane said with the specific tone of a mother who means both things simultaneously. She looked at Emily sideways. "Thank you. For the privacy protection in the filings. For keeping his name out of it. He didn't choose any of this. He deserves a clean start." Diane nodded. She was quiet for a moment. "What Nathan did naming him James. I didn't understand it at first. When he told me he wanted that name, I thought it was just a name he liked." She paused. "When I understood what it meant, I thought about changing it, giving him a different name." "Did you?" "No." She looked at her son. "Because James is a good name, and my son is a good person, and I decided I wasn't going to let Nathan Holloway take a name from my child just because he tried to use it as a weapon." She straightened. "Some things you take back." Emily looked at her. "Some things you take back," she agreed. She had not seen Vincent since the day she moved back to her parents' house, not by accident, by agreement. A quiet, unspoken agreement that they had arrived at the night before she left the warehouse, standing in the hallway with her small bag of borrowed clothes and the untraceable phone she was returning, and the full weight of everything that had been said between them over 4 days. "I need time," she had said. "I know. Not because I haven't decided anything. Because I need to make decisions from a place that isn't a warehouse 3 days after leaving my wedding." She had looked at him steadily. "I need to be standing in my own life before I decide what part of it you're in." He had nodded. He had not asked for a timeline or a promise or anything at all, which was, she had thought, the most significant thing he could have done. They had spoken by phone 3 times in the month since. Brief calls. Practical things. Mostly the foundation's legal structure, a referral for a contractor. When the Garden District office needed electrical work, a question she had about the Arsenault documentation. Each call had been exactly what it was, and nothing more, and she had been grateful for that, for the specific restraint of a man who had learned something real from an honest conversation. The fourth call came in November on a Tuesday evening while she was sitting on her apartment balcony. She had moved into her own place in September, a small apartment in the Marigny, with a balcony that looked over a courtyard full of banana trees, and looking at the city she loved in the particular golden light that belonged to New Orleans in November. "I want to ask you something," he said without preamble. "All right. I want to ask if I can see you, not in any official capacity, not related to the foundation or the case or anything practical." A brief pause. "Just to see you, if you want that." She sat with it. She looked at the courtyard. She thought about a 22-year-old woman who had loved someone with her whole self, and the 29-year-old woman she was now who understood that love was not the only variable. That love on its own without honesty, and without the freedom to be fully yourself inside, it was not enough. That the person she had been at 22 had loved the way a person loves before they know the cost of it, and the person she was now loved, if she loved with full knowledge of the cost and full intention to pay it only at a price that was fair. She thought about the bag of clothes in the correct size. She thought about the honest conversation at 3 a.m, a man agreeing he had been wrong without building architecture around it. She thought about 7 years. She said, "Sunday, there's a promenade along the Mississippi I want to walk. You know, the one near the ferry landing?" "Yes." 3 o'clock. "I'll be there," he said. Sunday came. She wore the red shoes. She had bought them 2 weeks after moving into the Marigny apartment, standing in a shoe store on Magazine Street, with Claire, who had pointed at them and said nothing because she didn't need to. Emily had bought them and worn them home, and stood in her own apartment in her own red shoes and thought, yes, this is the kind of person I am. This is the size of it. Vincent was already there when she arrived, which she had half expected. He was a man who arrived early, who prepared, who did not leave things to chance. He was standing near the railing, looking out at the river, and he turned when he heard her approach, and they looked at each other in the November light, with the city behind them, and the river in front of them, and 7 years and 4 days, and one honest conversation between them. "You look like yourself," he said. "I know," she said. "I've been practicing." They walked. For a while they said nothing, just moved along the promenade with the river running beside them, and it was not an uncomfortable silence, but the other kind. The kind between people who have already said the things that needed saying and can now just exist in the same space without it requiring effort. Then he said, "The foundation. I read about the opening in the paper." "You read the paper?" "I read that article specifically." A beat. Louise Tran's quote, about the door. Emily had not heard the quote until the day of the opening, when she had seen Louise across the room talking to a journalist, and had been too far away to hear the words, but had seen Louise's face, careful, deliberate, the face of a woman saying something she had been waiting a long time to say. She had read the article the next morning. Louise had said, "Nathan Holloway spent 15 years building rooms with no exits and calling them relationships. Emily Carter built a door. That's the difference between a man who controls and a woman who creates." "She's something," Emily said. "Yes. She wants to be involved going forward, not just financially. She wants to advise on the legal support program." "You should let her." "I am." She glanced at him sideways. "She also wants to meet you." He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because she said, and I'm quoting directly, 'I want to look at the man who spent 14 months building a case against Nathan Holloway and tell him he took too long.'" Emily watched his face. "I think she means it as a compliment." He almost smiled. Almost was the word. The muscles of it moved in his face, stopped just short, arrived instead as something quieter. "She's not wrong." "No." Emily looked at the river. "You did take too long. And I know why, and I understand the reasons, and understanding the reasons doesn't make it not true." She paused. "I need you to know that I can hold both of those things at once, the understanding and the truth." "I know you can," he said. "Good." She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. She turned and looked at him fully, the way she had looked at herself in the mirror in the bridal suite. The morning she left really looked without the management, without the performance of looking. Just the direct, honest thing. I have built something, she said. In the last 4 months, the foundation, the apartment, the version of myself that goes to sleep at night in her own space and wakes up in the morning without spending the first 10 minutes calculating what she's allowed to be that day. She held his gaze. I built that. Not for you. Not because of what happened with Nathan. I built it because it was always what I was going to build, and it just took longer than it should have because of the detours. I know. What I want to know, she said, is whether you can exist alongside that, not in front of it, not behind it, alongside. She did not look away. Because I am not the 22-year-old who will love you with her whole self before she knows the cost. I am a 29-year-old woman who knows exactly what she is and what she has built and what she will and will not accept. And if you want to be part of my life, it's that woman you're walking beside, not the version you remember. I was quiet for a moment. The river moved beside them. Somewhere across the water, a barge sounded its horn low and long, and the city answered with its own noise. I don't want the version I remember, he said. I want the one standing in front of me. Then we can start over. From where? From here. She looked at him. From right now. Not from 7 years ago, not from the wedding, not from the warehouse. From this conversation on this promenade between these two specific people who have both made significant mistakes and are choosing to know that clearly and start anyway. His jaw was tight, not with anger. She had learned to read him over these months, but with the effort of staying inside something that was moving him. Can I ask you something? Yes. Are you happy? He said it simply, no architecture around it. Just the direct thing. Right now, today. Not because of this conversation, just in the life you've built. She thought about the apartment, the red shoes, the foundation office smelling of fresh paint, her father's laugh, her mother's jasmine. Claire on the phone at 2 in the morning saying I'm in before she knew what she was in for. Sandra's evaluating gaze, Patricia's city council contacts, Louise's 14 years of documentation, Diane's son eating a small sandwich with full concentration. She thought about herself at 22 in love and complete and not yet knowing the cost. She thought about herself now. Yes, she said, simply without qualification. I am. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she could name now, finally after all the time it had taken her to learn his language. It was not relief, and it was not love, though both were in it. It was something more specific than either of those words. It was the look of a man who has been afraid for a very long time of a particular outcome, and has just been told, not promised, not guaranteed, but told that it did not happen. That the person he could not let go of is standing in her own light. Then start over, he said. She put her hand out. He took it. They walked along the Mississippi in the November light, the city of New Orleans spreading out behind them, the river moving beside them, the way it had always moved, indifferent, constant, carrying everything toward the Gulf and making room for what came next. They were not a rescue story. They were not a love story in the way that love stories get told with the clean lines and the single obstacle and the resolution that fits inside a final scene. They were two people who had made real mistakes and said honest things and were choosing to know each other in the full, complicated, unglamorous truth of who they actually were. Emily Carter, 29 years old, founder of the Open Door Foundation, woman who owned red shoes and an apartment with banana trees in the courtyard, and a laugh that no longer knew how to make itself smaller, walked forward. Not because someone had saved her, not because someone had chosen her, because she had chosen herself first, and that choice made alone in a bridal suite with shaking hands and 11 pounds of white silk, and 3 words sent to a number she had never deleted, had been the beginning of everything that mattered. She had sent for help. She had received a door, and she had walked through it herself. That was the story, not the man who came, not the man who stayed, not the man who left. The woman who decided, the woman who acted, the woman who built something real from the wreckage of what she had survived and called it without apology, her own. Some things you take back, and some things you build new. Emily Carter built new, And every door she opened from this day forward would open from the inside, by her own hand, at her own choosing, into a future that